Hi, this is Bruce Whipple, and welcome to the Business Acquisition Podcast. This is where we talk about how to acquire an already profitable business rather than build one from scratch. In the past 25 years, I've acquired several businesses, and I've also built several businesses from scratch. And I can tell you that it's a lot easier to do the former rather than the latter. You may know me from my association with Dan Pena, who I've worked with and been partners with for more than 25 years. Dan is gracious enough to mention me quite often in his videos, and it's been a real pleasure working with Dan, and one of the few people that I call a true friend. And actually, we've worked on many acquisitions together as well. And even though I said it was easier to acquire a business rather than build one from scratch, that doesn't necessarily mean it's easy. I often say that QLA is simple, but please don't make the mistake of thinking that simple is the same thing as easy. It still requires hard work. Dan Pena and I, the $50 billion man, had a discussion last week and then a couple of email exchanges on a subject that I'm going to talk about throughout this podcast, but I'll give you the specifics at the end. And it has to do with integrity. In this business, which is acquiring companies, you really do trade on your word. And there's a few things in life worth dying for. I think your integrity is one of those things, and it's critically important when you get into acquisitions. It's funny, it's not so funny, but I've been asked a few times, particularly in people who have built dream teams, well, I told them they would have an equity stake in the company, but I never put anything in writing, and now they've decided to leave, or I've decided they should leave. And do I really need to honor that? My answer to that is your decision. My answer to that is for myself, absolutely. If you told someone you were going to do it, that is a contract. It doesn't matter that you can maybe say you didn't put something in writing and have some wiggle words around it. Basically, what you'll get is the reputation of, I've dealt with him, but you know what? Get it in writing because I got burned by him. And you do not want that, certainly. So, how do I define integrity? A couple of ways. The simple explanation is doing the right thing when nobody's watching, or more importantly, for me anyway, doing the right thing when you can't afford to do it. Now, maybe let me give you a few examples of that. Is that when we were building the property tax business back in the 90s, basically I had run out of money. We were doing small clients. Eventually we got IBM, where we did most of their properties in the New York area. But the first one we did, and it's a process by which you challenge your property taxes, you go through what's called a grievance day. And you end up going down to a grievance board. You submit your grievance saying that you think you're overassessed, you give the reasons why, and they rule on it. Most of the time, they rule not in your favor. And in New York State, like in most areas, you had an avenue of appeal by which you could then pursue this through legal means and file a certiorari, which is what it's called, proceeding, to challenge the assessment in a legal proceeding. Now, IBM, as I'm sure you well know, had more than one attorney on staff. We were a tiny little company. We had failed at the grievance level, which was not unusual. And IBM was probably questioning whether they should go forward, how they should go forward. So we ended up meeting with IBM, and we told them, you have an absolute case here. You are paying millions more than you should. It's not unusual that you're denied at the grievance level, but you shouldn't let this thing die. You should pursue it. You have a staff of attorneys. If you want to have those attorneys pursue this, we can do that. And in fact, we will prepare basically the documents that they could use to prepare their case. If you want us to do it, we will end up securing an attorney. And my partner was an attorney, so we could do that, not within the company, but we could basically give him the work to do, and we can pursue it. But that's your choice. But please don't just let this opportunity go by. That was in a time that we did not have the cash to, quote unquote, have that go wrong. But the right thing to do was to give them the option. We had a fiduciary relationship to our client, which means you look out for your client's best interest more than your own, which most people find difficult to do. It's not so difficult if you have the right core principles. They ultimately said, look, you brought us to the dance. We're going to let you go ahead and do it. We ended up taking it forward. We ended up winning on their behalf. But it really was at a time when, as I said earlier, we couldn't afford to lose that money, but we did the right thing anyway. Now, of course, that's self-serving. It's a compliment to how we ran that business, but there's a really important lesson. Do the right thing particularly if you have a fiduciary relationship, for the other person. And the other thing I often say to people is, make believe your mother was sitting on your shoulder. Assume you have a good relationship and like your mother, or if she's passed on, the same thing. Imagine she was sitting on your shoulder. What would you do? Now, most people have a price at which they would sell their integrity. The prisons are full of people like that. But if you begin to say, okay, is this situation and the gain I'm going to get that price? The answer, usually, if you think about it, is no. I'm not going to cheat the other person for that amount. I'm not going to sell my integrity for that amount of money. So I would highly encourage you to think of those things. And critically important, in my opinion, is to remember you trade on your word, both positively and negative. So make sure. And the reason that Dan and I were talking was that there are a couple of guys, Shane and Chen, who apparently have put together a secret Facebook group in which they ask for testimonials slagging off some of the people that are mentors in this area, particularly Dan. And you end up going to a seminar. They end up telling you what they think you need to know. They have you sign an NDA. And my understanding is you paid, it's in England, £10,000 for that opportunity. And then you end up having to pay them £300 either a month or a year. That's uncertain. Forever. Forever is a long time. Particularly when, at least my understanding is, that neither one of these guys has any track record behind them. P.T. Barnum, ages ago, said there's a sucker born every minute, and that is absolutely true. And I hate people who prey on people who are desperate, who are thinking that there's a magic bullet by which they can end up getting rich, and it's easy, and all they need to do is do a couple of things. The truth is, as with QLA, there's a process that works without any question, but it's not easy. Is it simple? Yes. Is it easy? No. We end up with failures? Absolutely. But the process works. Most of the time, if it looks too good to be true, guess what? Yes, you're right. It is too good to be true. So I would encourage you to remember that. Make sure that you deal with people that have a track record. Dan said it over and over again, investigate before you invest, and that is critically important. So it just drove that point home really, really hard for me this week when Dan and I were talking. We were talking about these two guys, basically what they've found in people who will pay this kind of money to them, where they have not done anything other than become reasonably proficient, it would appear, in fleecing people. And there's a reason they call con men. They are confidence men. They generate confidence in you. So do your homework, do your research, and the overriding in how you conduct your business is absolutely conduct your business as if your mother was sitting on your shoulder, and do the right thing when you can't afford. Those are basically my message this week. So I hope you take that to heart. I hope that you already have that as a core principle. We've all done things that we wish we hadn't in our past. You can learn from those. You can make sure that you don't repeat those going forward. So hold yourself to the absolute highest standard that you can. In the end, that will pay off with massive benefits for you. I am absolutely convinced. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments or ideas for future episodes, please email Bruce at brucewhipple.com. And if you're not already on our mailing list, head over to brucewhipple.com and sign up and grab any of the free reports. That'll put you on the mailing list. There is a lot of free information you can use to acquire already profitable businesses. This is Bruce Whipple. Thanks for listening to the Business Acquisition Podcast. And remember, you miss 100% of the opportunities you fail to take. And procrastination truly is the thief of time. So do something today, please. Your future self will be proud of you.